Sports reports, no gimmicks, no clowns. 2-5, Mr. Logical, we run this town. Real talk only, no chasing, no doubt. From the east to the west, it's the order we shout. Mic check, lights flash, game time, stay ready. 2 vets in the zone, keep the pressure real heavy. Big hits, big plays, yeah, we breaking it down. Truth rings in your speakers, every word is the crown. From the north side hustle to that southern flame. Midwest grind, west coast of the game. Sports talk kings, yeah, we wear that crown. Turn it up, let them know it's about to go down. Sports reports, no gimmicks, no clowns. 2-5, Mr. Logical, we run this town. Real talk only, no chaser, no doubt. From the east to the west, it's the order we shout.
It's about to go down.
Yes.
I'm like, yo, where I'm at? I realized my camera was covered.
You are now listening to the sounds of Sports Reports Disorder, where cameras will remain uncovered.
All day.
Tonight, SEC. We got our last Power 4 conference preview of the season, which leads into our college football playoff picks. You know what I'm saying? I got the one and only world-renowned, world-famous. He goes by the name of Mr. Logical, and he ain't no SEC dude. He's representing Jersey.
True indeed.
You know what I'm saying?
All day. I mean, you heard.
And I'm down here in SEC country, but, I go by the name of 2-5. You know what I'm saying? Let's get right into some storylines here. Like, review, subscribe, share, rate, do all the free things. Do all the good things. Liquid Death in hand. Make it count. Let's get it. So, Mr. Logical.
Yeah.
The SEC been talking a whole lot of trash over the last couple of weeks.
They've been talking about different than any other year.
Well, it's a little different this time because normally they just do the whole beat your chest. We're better than you. We play a tougher schedule than you. And a lot of times, they ain't wrong. But, said at the same time, they talking about, should we break away? So at first I was like, okay, Greg Sankey's just getting ahead of himself. It's drama. It's the off season. Let's try to win some headlines. And then Kirby Smart come out talking about, I've been in that space. What they talking about, Mr. Logical?
They are talking about this excessive need for greed and control that seems to encapsulate Americans who are somehow monetizing off of whatever it is that they're doing. There's no reason for them to act as if they don't get every benefit of the doubt, every coin toss, every short straw somebody else draws. The SEC, because of their leverage, because every single year we watch the NFL draft, and aside from the 2 teams that are represented in the championship game and the 4 teams in the Final Four, which I've said for years, I think the GMs just wait until that time of the year to recruit. Because it was one year Texas had 3 guys get drafted. But then they go to the college football playoffs and they have like 12. So it's like, I think GMs wait for that Final Four to find out their guys. But through in from pick 1 to pick 255, 256, or whatever that number is, it's SEC players. So that's the leverage. SEC was a team that was getting the biggest contracts. That's their leverage. Their coaches, their players, their stadiums, their rivalries are all iconic. That's their leverage. The problem is greed ultimately will do them in. They can stay the course right now, and they'll get the biggest slice of the pie no matter what the pie is. But for some reason, they seem to want more, and I don't understand why.
So let's just walk this out for a second. The SEC decides to leave the NCAA or however this would work. Is Mr. Logical watching weekly SEC football?
Yeah, I'm watching it because it's college football. I don't have a dog in the fight. I don't pay for any of the apps. I don't buy any of the gear. I just watch whatever comes across whatever screen I'm sitting in front of. So I don't have like this cult like allegiance to any other teams. Even as a Utah fan, I don't have a cult level following or expectation of other people to follow them. I think the SEC, they got a little too much dip in their chip and they just feel like everybody wants to be us. And it's like, yo, just continue to be you, where you are the front runner every year. Granted, we can't put six of your teams into the playoff every year, but your four best teams will get a consideration. Maybe you get three in. That's still a lot out of 12. Now I'm saying that's a
A third
large
of
chunk
it, yeah.
of
And,
just a
and
third of the thing. Yeah. So
so I think I would watch it
quarter
too.
of it, excuse me.
Because the first thing for me about college football is obviously going to start and end with rivalry. So I'm here. I'm going to watch Tennessee and Bama. I'm going to watch Texas A&M and Texas, the Red River Shootout, all that good stuff like that. But first of all, I don't know who the hell came up with this SEC schedule this year. Because why the hell ain't Tennessee playing Georgia or Florida? But anyway,
Yeah.
I think I would watch too, but it makes me wonder how it works for the other sports. Not necessarily, obviously, golf or anything like that, but how does March Madness work? Like you're losing that as well. Like you're going to be losing everything that you own or that you're a part of now. So from that standpoint of you're going to be in the circle jerk playing each other, that'll be fun. But I don't know what the ratings look like after we just watched y'all play whatever amount of games and then the playoff game is Tennessee against Georgia, or is it the end of the season and then all of a sudden the SEC title game is your title game? There's there's nothing else to do. Then, like I said, when March Madness comes around, that hurts the NCAA because you're taking 16 brands away that they would have to refill with mediocre teams. But it also hurts the SEC because they're not a part of that March Madness pageantry. So from that standpoint, do you think that would hurt the NCAA more or would that hurt the SEC more?
I think the March Madness aspect of SEC isn't the same, doesn't have the same impact. What they do in December and January, that has real NCAA ramifications if they're not there. I think the NCAA tournament is a matter of who's there, who's in my bracket, who's helping me win the office pool. Because for the most part, those 30, 32 games that these college athletes playing basketball don't incur the same amount of attention that the football team does. The thing with the SEC threatening to pull away, we heard about the news of LeBron going to the Sixers. But for like the last year and a half, the Sixers were talking about moving to either Chinatown or into Jersey into Camden. They hashed it out back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. Voila, they're staying. I think it's a matter of a power play, a leverage pool, which is going to put the SEC in a position of where they're going to say something along the lines. It's like, we get 4 guaranteed spots or we're leaving. That's what it's all about.
Well, like it sounds like, I think that 24 is coming sooner than later as far as the playoff goes. So in that scenario, the SEC might want 6 or 7.
Yeah. The rest said what to like the Phillies leaving Philly or the Sixers leaving Philly or just the SEC trying to pull out for leverage. Because that's all it really is, because you're all the hype, I don't want to say the hype, but the cachet surrounding the SEC is based on the fact that they do produce top NFL talent. Oh yeah, the Sixers were talking about moving from
this was 2 years ago?
Yeah, like for like the last couple of years, they were talking about moving to either Camden or to Chinatown, which would all of the businesses and everyone in Chinatown was like, no, we're not giving this up. And then the Philly and the city and everyone kind of came to this concession that the location for Philly is probably the best as far as all the cities I've been to with sports teams. it's the best one. You have the baseball, the football, and the hockey, basketball arena, all in the same, literally the same block. It's all right there, same parking, everything else. So, but if you force your leverage, like the SEC, I believe they're doing, you don't get the same. I don't know if you get the same support. I don't know if the money comes with you. I don't know if they ice you out of the championships. Because if it's an NCAA
yes, an
championship,
NCAA sanctioned thing, so you wouldn't be a part of that under that umbrella anymore.
I don't know if I'm watching football from August, which 0 week starts, to November with rivalry week, the 16 SEC teams, and ignoring everybody else who's going to play for the college football championship.
No, I'm watching all of it. But, you know what I'm saying? But to your point, welcome back. You know, to your point, yeah, you would have to get rid of the conference championship games. And I know Kirby Smart has already talked about that. And it's something that I've been talking about even prior to even getting close to a 2014 playoff. Because at this stage, I don't know what the conference championship means or like because like when you look at these conferences, they're so overinflated that, you know, these teams, you know, yeah, they don't. The SWAC and the MEAC have championship games, and then the winners of those play the Celebration Bowl, but everybody else gets the at-large or, you know, berth into the playoffs. But as far as the FBS goes, like looking at the SEC, for example, right? You know, you got teams that just don't play the other good teams. You know, we were talking about this last year. A&M made the playoff last year. They didn't play Ole Miss. They didn't play Bama. They didn't play Georgia in the regular season. So a lot of these teams are getting to the conference championship game nowadays based off of you just had the best draw, not because you were the best team. And that's why when we were doing the ACC preview, I was talking about a team like NC State, who I would never consider to be an ACC contender. But when you look at the schedule, we were looking at Texas Tech the other day. Texas Tech is the best team in the Big 12, probably.
They might have the easiest schedule in the country.
But they might have one of the easiest schedules in the country. You know what I mean?
They definitely have the easiest schedule in the Big 12, which shouldn't be the case considering they won it last year.
Yeah.
And it's not because of their talent. It's just like the team that they are playing are substantially under-talented in comparison to Texas Tech.
Right. So we're going to take the Band-Aid off early, Mr. Logical. You know what I'm saying? We're going to get into our playoff picks later, but I'm just going to ask you right here and right now. Is this the year for Texas and Sark?
No.
Until everybody's 7-2.
I'm going to say no. I'm going to say no simply because I haven't been presented with any evidence that Sark as a coach has risen above expectations. And then subsequently, you talk about Texas, and you said it last year, maybe even the year before. I
say it every year.
The most overrated college football program.
No, that ain't what I said. I said they're the most overrated thing in sports, period.
Oh, wow. That he ramped it up.
You know what I'm saying? No, I say that every year because they got all I hear about is the billionaires. Texas is the best job in the country, all this and all that. And, you know, in my lifetime, they got one national title.
All the classic high school football TV shows and movies. Shout out to Tweeter. I mean, West Canaan Wolves.
TCU made a national title game more recently than Texas.
So, and with that being said, that's the piece that always brings me back, like you said, brings me back to the mean. It's like they always look like, and I believe before the NIL, I thought they were best positioned to load their team up. It just never really delivered, which championships are huge expectations. They had the coaching changes. Nick Saban had a program at Alabama to where he was running a machine. So I just don't see Texas just turning a corner. I know everyone loves Arch, but if his name was Arch Richardson, I don't think the admiration will be on the scale that it is. because we haven't seen anything. We talk about this with the draft. You'll have a guy who's a little undersized, but they like him, and they'll talk about how he doesn't let his size stop him from competing. But then a guy that you're not really sure about in the third or fourth round who's undersized, you'll say, I think his size might be a factor in the NFL. The statements are both true, but if you like the guy, then I think you go with him. And I believe that's what Texas has going every year.
So like for me, right?
Like with that dead billionaire, it's hard to build.
Sark is one of these dudes that you ain't gonna believe that he's gonna get over the hump until he gets over the hump.
Until he's hoisting the trophy.
Yeah, like so we were talking about Dan Lanning the other day. I don't feel that way about Dan Lanning. You know, I think Dan Lanning is a great coach that is just young in his head coaching career. This is only year 4 or so as a head coach for him. You know,
but you do pick against him because of it sometimes. Like you'll
definitely,
talk about,
yeah. Because but that's more of a you have to get over the hump. Sark has been doing this for a while, and at a certain point, you just become who you are, I think. And you know, I think Sark is one of those guys that because Texas, like just looking at the talent on paper, Texas should win the national title this year. Just looking at the talent on paper. But before he came to Texas, what was my name for him? 8-win Sark. You know what I mean? Like he's winning extra games now because he's at Texas. But when you see him in these big game moments or when stakes are on the line, all that offensive genius that they talk about, it goes out the window. You match him up against Ohio State, it's gone.
He was an offensive coordinator in Atlanta for a year. I couldn't get him out there fast enough.
And don't forget, you know what I mean? Because we look back at last season and we talk about Texas's schedule. Oh, if they didn't play Ohio State, they probably would have made the playoff. You still lost to Florida. You know what I mean? Florida went 4-8, by the way. So, like, that Ohio State game is not heavier than losing to a 4-8 team. So you know, but, you know, he did make a change this year. They had a great defensive coordinator. They brought back Muschamp anyway. So Muschamp is back as the defensive coordinator this year. So I'm interested to see what differences and how that looks because their defense was great last year. I don't know why they got rid of the offensive coordinator. So, but all right, you know, the question of the year, every week, is Kalen DeBoer on the hot seat? How many games does he need to win to keep his job?
11.
So no playoff, no DeBoer next year.
11 is a stretch. They need to look like championship contenders early. There can't be, as we pull up their schedule.
Yeah, I got it. There you go.
They can't have a sluggish start. They can't lose to
they're at the
Florida
top here.
State.
Yeah.
So as their schedule is kind of laid out, they have to be 5-0 in that matchup with Georgia.
And I think they will be.
They could be no worse than 6-1 going into the bye. Like that's the I think that's the standard for him. 6-1 going into the bye. Because you can't be 5-2 hoping to win out and the committee grants you a spot. Because you don't know how the rest of the season is going to play out. We talk about Texas Tech having a very easy schedule. They could be 12-0. We talk about maybe Oklahoma State being a surprise team. Maybe they sneak in as your 10-2. So like you don't want to be in that 10-2 range if you're Kalen DeBoer again. You want to look like everything is making championship sense. We talked about it last year, the inability to run the ball, which makes zero sense considering the way that they recruit offensive linemen. Like, how are you not just rolling out 3 and 4 backs that are averaging 4 to 5 yards a carry, 4 to 5.5 yards a carry? And they weren't, because that's how you look like a championship team when you dominate up front, and they never look like it.
Yeah, and Caden Proctor's gone this year, so we'll get to them here in a little bit. So then, we got new coaches, Silverfield at Arkansas. Alex Golish at Auburn, obviously public enemy number 2 or 1A, Lane Kiffin at LSU, John Summerall at Florida, Will Stein at Kentucky. And, and I'm loving me some Will Stein, SEC Media Days the other day. Why do you think you can win big at Kentucky? Because of me. Say less. You know what I'm saying? Let's throw the ball out there. And guess what? Week 2, lose by less than 17 to Bama.
I think Kurt Signetti got these dudes thinking that swag is like part of the hiring package.
Well, the good news, for Will Stein, he's only 36. So some of it is youth. So, I guess if you're Kentucky, you're hoping that you just picked up your Sean McVay. He came in right here from the Alamo, and then he was the offensive coordinator out at Oregon the last couple of years. So he's been around, he's been around talent. He has these Texas ties.
Oregon talent. He's getting Oregon talent to Kentucky. That's what it boils down to.
We'll see.
Is he getting a version of Dante Moore?
So I guess the question would be how many of them? Because I think he'll get some, but the question is how many? Because now this is where the SEC gets kind of tilted, right? Because Shane Beamer might be on the hot seat, at South Carolina. If they don't win 8 to 9 games this year, that might be trouble. Obviously Kirby Smart's not going anywhere. I don't think Heupel's going anywhere. You got all these new coaches. Elko's not going anywhere. So from that standpoint, you have a new conference that is not only a step up in competition, but in addition to the best players, it has some of the best coaches too. Because Summerall, of course, was the architect at Tulane. You had Golish, who built Josh Heupel's offense at Tennessee, that all of a sudden is beating Alabama every so often now. So from that standpoint, the SEC at that Kentucky level, it's about beating the teams at your level, the Vanderbilts, the Mississippi States, and then pulling off a Tennessee or two. So, we'll see how it goes. But let's get right into this, So let's take it from the top. The Georgia Bulldogs. A little while ago, I was talking about how they're one of the most underappreciated teams in the country. They're 73-9 since 2020.
Shout out Golden State.
Shout out to the Warriors. Last year, I had a lot of questions about Gunnar Stockton. Obviously, we didn't have much material to go off of. We only saw him the second half of the SEC title game after Carson Beck got hurt. And then we saw him in the playoff game against Notre Dame. But it was unfair to try to judge him because of that. He came out last year and showed, this is what Georgia could be if they have a quarterback. So, so from that standpoint, I think they're in good hands. They bring both their running backs back, Frazier and Bowens. They get some good receivers in the transfer portal. They got 13 defenders back that played at least 200 snaps last year. So, of course, we're talking about Georgia. Defense is what they do. So, Kirby Smart has been real flippant. So I don't know if we're going to see a different Georgia this year because they seem to have attitude now. At SEC Media Days, they were asking him, who's a guy that's standing out at camp right now and all that kind of stuff. And he's all like, well, if I knew the answer to that, saying I win the Powerball and all this kind of stuff like that. And, so and he's like, I use you in your questions to motivate them. So interesting way.
Just say we good.
Yeah, just say we're good. And
we're a good team. We brought back a lot of starters. We tend to be on the. You're a tier 1 SEC team, and you have been for a lot of years.
Yeah.
You won a chip. You're in contention every year. I have more faith in them recently. Granted, Nick Saban not being in Alabama. I think all the coaching changes and the hot seat stuff is just all of that misses Georgia. They have great recruiting, transfer portal. They have a lot of money. They have a steady head at quarterback. Because he's not the type of quarterback that you would try to steal via the transfer portal. He doesn't have like those ultra. He doesn't have the arm or the body or anything like that. Where it's like, you know what, we got to steal him from Georgia. So he's comfortable there. He's good with the system, and it's just get the ball to your playmakers in space, make plays with your legs when you have opportunity, play tough defense on the front seven, punish them in the back end with your safeties and corners, who every single year end up getting drafted first or second round in the NFL draft out of University of Georgia. So, yeah, I think they're in the proverbial catbird seat to keep a stranglehold on the SEC.
And see, like they if their name wasn't Georgia, they have a very tricky schedule, like just looking at it, because they get the easy win with Tennessee State. They're probably going to make quick work of my Hilltoppers. They go down to Fayetteville, but then it gets interesting. You get Oklahoma, it's at home. You get Vandy, so trap game because you go to Tuscaloosa the week after that. And I know y'all remember the last time Alabama hosted Georgia. Ryan Williams on the sideline with that crazy catch, Georgia after coming back from 28-3 or whatever it was. And then, Alabama with the late touchdown to win. But then you get Auburn the week after. Not that Auburn's a great team. They might not even be a good team. But what I do know is they hate Georgia. That's a big rivalry. So you get Bama and Auburn back to back.
All that hate in the world can't stop the dudes up front.
Hey,
all
but you know what, though?
Your heart
and you're right, too. Yeah. No, but you know what, though? You say that, which is not wrong, per se. But don't forget, we had an argument last year about whether that was a fumble or not at the goal line in that game. If that was called a fumble, Georgia loses that game to Auburn last year. So, You know what I mean? So that's what I'm saying. Like, you can't take a week off. We joke about the SEC and their tough schedule, but it's real. You know what I'm saying?
When the good teams are not clicking, the bottom falls out. Kentucky can beat you week 6, and they're 3-2 going into that game. Auburn 3-2 going into that game. Where we got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. If Auburn's not in contention, those guys are checking out. It's a different expectation when you go to that school. So I just think Georgia is gonna. I don't
think they check out against Georgia and Auburn though. They're going to play their hardest. They might lose. They might get their ass kicked.
Yeah,
but they're going to play hard in those games.
I think Georgia's the gold standard. I don't think any teams that have been transplanted into the SEC recently, with Oklahoma and your Texas being the proverbial, like they're taking over. It's a different brand of football they play there, and it's a level of consistency and competition that you have to be. Iron sharpens iron, and I don't think these other guys have gotten that opportunity to really get those lumps yet. They are essentially Big 12 teams playing the SEC schedule. So I like the quintessential blue blood SEC school being Georgia going forward.
So I think that Texas is built like a SEC team. I think Oklahoma still has a little ways to go, but the defense is definitely there, as we saw last year. But Georgia is not out the woods after that either. You know what I mean? So you get OU, it's at home. You get Vandy as the trap game. You get at Tuscaloosa, Auburn. You take your bye. Then you play the Gators, your other rival. Probably your biggest, with the new coach. The game is in Atlanta this year, not Jacksonville, because the stadium's being renovated and all that. So the game is at the compressor. So home field advantage, Georgia.
Home game, Georgia.
You know what I mean? But then you go to Ole Miss the week after that.
That's probably their toughest game. I'm not being dismissive of Alabama. I just feel like Alabama, that's game 5. That's game 5 for them.
Or let's see, 6. I'm sorry. 6.
That's game 6 for them. They're probably going to be 5-0.
I think so. And I think they beat Bama.
I'm talking about Bama, like Bama going into that.
Oh, you're talking about Bama. Sorry. Okay.
Bama going into that game, they're probably 5-0 as well.
Yeah.
But I don't know if the games that Bama play leading up to that matchup with Georgia prepare them for Georgia. If you have a tough game against Florida State, or it's a nail biter 27-24 against South Carolina, Mississippi State's give you a run for the money. I think the support and the pressure that's going to be kind of levied upon Bama and their hot coach seat. Remember, that lady said if she won the Powerball 2 years ago, she was going to buy him out. So that was 2 years ago. They made the playoffs last year, but it was basically a let-in.
Hey, if a fan called you with like, I don't even know how much, $200 million, and told you they'd buy you out, would you take it?
Absolutely. I'm out. I'm out.
But they also, depending on how the season goes, Georgia also has to go to Willie Bryce to play South Carolina late in the season. That could be tricky, depending on which South Carolina we get. You know,
but you talked about their coach already being on a hot seat,
and that's why I said it depends on which, you know what I mean, how their season goes. Because I think
we're looking at that's game 11.
Yeah, because he could be fired by then. I mean, I doubt it. I doubt it, but
7-2, 8-3. If it what's that? So that's game 11. If they're not 8-2, 7-3 going, it's 7-3 going into that game, he might not be coaching. See what I'm saying? Like that's a good record, but 7-3, it's a potential he might not be there.
I think he'll be there at 7-3. I think that
depends on what the 3 are.
I think if he gets 7, depending on which 7, I think he's fine. But but we'll see. But so we were talking about Oklahoma. You were talking about them being a Big 12 team. They were different once John Mateer hurt his thumb last year. Before the thumb injury, Oklahoma was on their way. They had pushed Michigan around. Later in the season, even after the thumb, they beat Bama, down in Tuscaloosa. They never went over 400 yards again once he hurt that thumb. They brought in Jaden Ott last year from Cal, who I thought was going to be a big factor in their offense. He was injured throughout the year. He only had 21 carries. So same problem as Alabama had. Oklahoma couldn't run the ball. And the thing about a dude like Mateer, he's the kind of guy that you should be able to run some kind of read option or some kind of spread with him because of what he brings to the table. But he won't let go of the ball. He won't give the ball to the running back. He's just going to keep it, and he's going to take shots. But
he plays like a high school quarterback,
right?
Like he plays like I'm the guy on the field, makes the plays.
But they still got your guy Isaiah Satenga, at receiver. So they got that going for him. They picked up Terrell Harris from Virginia, great pickup. They went and got Parker Livingstone from Texas. Lloyd Avant from Colorado State in the backfield. So tight end coach Jason Witten is in the house. Oklahoma might have a top 3 SEC defense. So, that's where they're going to make their bread and butter, So they got some guys back. They lost a lot of guys, but most importantly, they have the Bowen brothers back. So Peyton and Eli, obviously there was a theme there. What I mean? But what do you think about Oklahoma this year?
I like them. I thought they played Alabama very tough, even in that playoff game. Like you said, Mateer's injury definitely set them back. But it's the same thing that you get with a team like Texas, a team like South Carolina, a team like, before last year, Ole Miss. They have the talent. It's just that the expectations preseason always are a bridge too far for the talent. So the season gets judged off of the lofty expectations. And I think it happens every year to Oklahoma because they're always a good team. Obviously, they recruit well. They recruit Texas well. A lot of players who don't go to Texas, who are from the state of Texas, end up at Oklahoma. They have the money to do the recruiting. I just think that they end up with these expectations that are just too lofty, and they come up a little short. I like what Mateer does. I think he's proven to be like the man, but like you said, he's got to get rid of the ball. They got to be able to run the ball better. The defense is solid. It has some real studs on the defensive side of the ball. So they are adapting to the SEC mindset. Because I think after you get tossed around after a couple of games, you recognize like, okay, this is a notch above what we were used to in the Big 12 for the past few years. But it's still going to take a little time for that to happen.
They made the playoff last year, so not only that, but here, like for Oklahoma to reach their maximum potential, and this is a podcast, so hyperbole is okay. What I'm saying? So for Oklahoma to meet their potential, he almost has to have a Tebow level effect, where where he's just the offense, he's the focal point, everything runs through him. Like even
we got John and you don't.
Yeah, that's what it's got to be. So they open with UTEP before going to the Big House, and I just don't know how I'm feeling about Bryce Underwood this year. So I'm still saying that Oklahoma is going to go to the Big House and win that game. They get New Mexico before they go to Georgia, bye week, then Red River. So that's their season right there. Saying they have to find a way to split Georgia and Texas, and I think obviously you would bet on Texas since the game is in Athens, so you don't expect them to win at Georgia, but you got the neutral site in Dallas. You get Kentucky, at Mississippi State, South Carolina, then you get another one at the Swamp. Now, the reason I said that you need to split, is because you could lose that game at the Swamp just off of the environment. We saw what happened to Texas last year. And I think Florida's going to be a little bit better than they were last year. I really like John Summerall and hate the fact that he's there and not Tallahassee. But anyway, then they get Ole Miss the week after that, but it's not over there. They get A&M. Both of those at least are at home. You know what I mean? So if you could split Georgia and Texas, split Ole Miss and A&M, and not lose at the Swamp, that's a playoff team.
So that's 10-2.
Yeah.
But where's the bad game?
I hope it's not the Swamp. You know what I'm saying? That's the thing. It could be the Swamp, like I said, just based off of environment.
Michigan. I think it could be Michigan, at Michigan.
Oh, here we go. Kyle Whittingham, Kool-Aid.
Kyle Whittingham. Shout out to Salt Lake City. I think I don't believe Kyle Whittingham has had a quarterback with the physical capabilities as Bryce Underwood. But I think he's had a game plan for a quarterback like Bryce Underwood for years. Just he couldn't get it fully. Like Cam Rising, getting out of the pocket, moving around, kept getting injured. Devin Dampier, mobile quarterback, undersized, still doing his thing. But I think what Cam Rising was able to do in the Utah offense and what Dampier is able to do at his size, I think you kind of roll that into one and you have Bryce Underwood. I think the easy read, I think the zone reads, I think tight end play is huge in Utah. A lot of Utah tight ends end up getting time in the league. A lot of their offensive line, defensive line, and Michigan was already known for that anyway. So I think that's one of those games where Bryce Underwood runs for 120 yards and 3 touchdowns just off of play calling and style early in the year. You haven't seen it, and I think if Whittingham has his way, in my personal opinion, I think that's how he deploys Bryce Underwood. Now, you get someone, what is he, 6'5", 240, 250. We'll call him 6'5", 230, just to be generous because he's still in college. Getting them on the edge, playing the way that Dampier and Cam Rising were playing, like that combination, I think that can be dangerous for a team in week 2 coming off a game where they play UTEP week 1.
Maybe. But said and then they close with Missouri. So, Oklahoma, I'm telling you, I got my eye on them. Then you got Bama. Let's talk Bama for a second. So we talked about Kalen DeBoer, and what he was going to be dealing with. They did lose Caden Proctor, off the offensive line. Ryan Williams has undergone a name change. He's in his Maurice Jones-Drew era. He is now Ryan Coleman Williams.
Wearing number one.
Wearing number one. They brought in Noah Rogers from NC State. So last year, as Mr. Logical was talking about, Bama as a team averaged 3.4 yards per carry.
You know, the hole.
Yeah, and they lost Parker Braceford as well off the offensive line. So it is, and you're breaking in another new quarterback. You know, so you had Ty Simpson last year off to the NFL. Now you're down to Austin Mack or Keelan Russell. I'm thinking Keelan Russell. And if it is Keelan Russell, I like it. You know, now, where the bread and butter for Bama is going to be is their secondary. You know, Xavier Brown, Keon Saab, in their linebackers, Jan St. Pierre. So Alabama's defense, they have the schedule to start the season good. They start off with East Carolina, who's breaking in a new quarterback. Kentucky breaking in a new quarterback, even though he's talented, Kenny Minchie. Florida State, who knows? South Carolina, they seem to just have South Carolina's number. Remember last year in Columbia, South Carolina went into the fourth quarter with that lead, and all those butt cheeks around Tuscaloosa was getting real tight, before they game copped that thing. Then you got Mississippi State. So I do think that Bama's 5-0 headed into that Georgia game. I think they lose to Georgia. They get Tennessee. Now, this is where it gets kind of interesting because one bet that you could always make was Bama over Tennessee. Until that dude false started on that kick.
False started on the kick.
And ever
no
since
one else
then,
talks about it but me. You and I, we're the only people that mention that.
And ever since then, Bama holds a 3-2 edge in the last 5 games against Tennessee. This one is at Knoxville, where they lost last time they went there. They get A&M, back-to-back, but it's at home. Coming off the bye, they get Lane Kiffin, Vandy, Chattanooga, and then the Iron Bowl. So, for me, same thing I said about Oklahoma, right? Don't lose at the Swamp. So, if you're Bama, don't lose at Knoxville. Don't lose in Neyland. And I think you could be on the right path because if you beat Tennessee, I don't think losing to an A&M or LSU hurts you. So a 10-2 Bama, I think, has a good shot as anybody into getting into the playoff.
10-2 Bama is getting in. The problem is, I think they're more likely to be 9-3.
Okay.
I think a stumble happens before the Georgia game.
Okay.
I don't know where it is just yet. Maybe it's a South Carolina game. But I just feel like 5-0 going into week 6. We haven't seen it yet.
Well, I will say Mississippi State, they took Texas and Tennessee to overtime last year. They got Florida down to the last possession. And then they actually beat Arizona State. So, don't sleep on Mississippi State. And they got a better quarterback this year.
Yeah, I just think the first 5 weeks, if it was a 5th, we all be drunk. Those are the type of teams that if they come with this is our college football playoff game, that kind of mindset. In the NFL, it's like, oh, when you play the Chiefs, this is your Super Bowl.
Yeah.
You think
Bama's name still carries that?
Absolutely, just because it's Bama.
Okay.
It's been the quintessential marquee university in your region since your grandfather.
Since
you know what I'm saying? It's like let's keep it real. Like early 90s was 30 years ago.
Yeah.
I mean, so it's been like the quintessential organization for so long. They had their down years, but you can't really remember when, just because it's Bama. They've always churned out the talent. So I think every week, especially those particular teams, granted, East Carolina might just be outmatched, but you get a couple of bad fumbles, a bad pick six, a quarterback change. I think those are the kind of games where something like that happens.
Yeah, and Nick Saban, right? His next to last season, when they was playing around trying to figure out who his quarterback was going to be, they had that game against South Florida that was 10-3 at halftime.
Or the game when they that was Kalen DeBoer that lost to Vanderbilt.
Yes, and then they lost to Florida State, of course, last year, 5-7 Florida State.
So
that was the first game of the season.
Yeah, but that's what I mean. It's one of those coin toss games that normally wouldn't be. Normally that game is 90-10, 85-15. Some of these games being closer to 50-50 and 55-45, that's tough for a team that has a coach that doesn't really have the support of the fan base. You feel that. You feel that in the crowd. He's going to see it at the store. He's going to see it driving around the city. Like talking about Texas. Friday Night Lights. Remember when he was like going to the Walmart and the people were stopping him in the parking lot like, hey, what you going to do about this game Friday night? That's his high school football. Imagine what Alabama head coach is getting, or his family's potentially getting when he's out in public. If they go into week 3 1-1, and they about to play Florida State for the second year in a row.
Yeah, so it's that time of the show where I say the two words that Mr. Logic will hate more than anything else in college football.
Let's say it with me.
Neutral site.
Site.
All right, Ole Miss starting the season with Louisville. How about that? And then, they got Trinidad Chambliss back. The drama is over. He will be back. He will be a Heisman candidate. He finished 8th last year, 10th in the nation in yards per game. They got Kewan Lacey back, over 1,500 yards, 24 touchdowns. He finished as a finalist for the Doak Walker. They do have to replace both their tackles, so issue there. They do have to replace pretty much all the wide receivers. They lost their best defender to LSU. Go figure. Lane Kiffin took him. But they do have Will Eccles, Cam Franklin, and Sudareen Parkins back. Antonio Kite in the secondary. Edwin Joseph from Florida State, in the secondary. So, the thing about Ole Miss, it's interesting, right? Because Pete Golding, first time as a head coach, he got thrown into the fire last year because of what Lane Kiffin did. So he had to jump into the playoffs. And he damn near pulled it off. They got to the semifinal and, lost a very close game to the Hurricanes. So, was that beginner's luck? Was that momentum and motivation because of what Kiffin did? And now back to life, back to reality.
No, I think because he was a defensive coach, he understood the physical side of the game. Even if you don't know anything about X's and O's, you can teach physicality. You can preach physicality. You can ride physicality because that offensively or defensively, if you win that battle, you're probably going to win the game. So I think understanding what to do defensively and having a talent like Trinidad Chambliss already, who was already in the groove all year long, I don't think it was a fluke. I think they could repeat and have the same amount of impact, and then go on to the college football playoff as well. And looking at their schedule, if I'm looking at it right, we know Lane. It's tough, but I think that the whole SEC is just littered with tough schedules. I think,
but I think
their
it's
tough
more
going to be 28-24, a lot of 28-24 games, which is your LSU and Ole Miss games, your Texas A&M, Bama games.
But I think it's more how it lines up, because so they get the neutral site with Louisville. They should win that game. Louisville's going to be breaking in a new quarterback, so I'll give them the advantage.
Where is it?
Nashville.
Okay.
It's a neutral site that makes sense.
Nashville's more central Tennessee, right?
I believe so.
Memphis is closer, so Memphis is probably closer to
Memphis is super west. Yeah.
Okay, so that might be a little much.
Yeah, so you get Charlotte in week 2, fine, but then you get the big one, right? Who has the most pressure? Is the pressure on Kiffin to win that game? Is the pressure on Kiffin? Okay, then Kiffin, you go to the swamp.
It was an embarrassing way. It was like a stain on the college football playoffs, SEC, the NIL, the coaching, the bureaucracy that surrounded college football the way he left.
I'm telling you
So
now, I don't know.
It has to work. It has to work because it's like you did all of this just to lose to the team you left.
Yeah, I like Louisville, but I just think game one, maybe if they were playing game 4 or 5 and Lincoln Keenholz had a few games under his belt, maybe, but coming off week 1, I don't know. That's tough. But also, like, looking at Ole Miss, looking at the schedule, they get LSU, then they go to the Swamp. Then they go to Vanderbilt after the bye. They get Missouri, so they should win both of those. Then it gets real after that. You go to Austin and play Georgia within a 3-week period with Auburn in between. Then the week after Georgia, you have to go to Norman. That's a tough stretch. I don't care who you are. Then they get Wofford and close with the rivalry.
But they're tough games, but I don't think those teams would be betting favorites over Ole Miss. I'm not predicting like an undefeated season, but I just feel as if
I think
when you're returning a quarterback that I don't believe I think Texas has more questions.
I think that they'll be
Ole Miss does.
I think they'll be a 3.5 to 4 point underdog at Texas.
Just because it's at Texas.
Yeah, like I think they could possibly.
If it was in Dallas, it'd be a split. But you're saying at Austin, you get 3 points just because you're. That's what
I think Georgia could be favored over them, depending on how it goes, close to a touchdown. I think that you're going to be underdogs going into Norman, like another road game, but you're going to be the underdog there, maybe. But the LSU game, I know y'all probably can't wear a bulletproof vest into the stadium, but I would advise that you just put a bunch of tape up under there. You know what I'm saying? It's going to be getting crazy up in Oxford and Vaught Hemingway. So then you got the Longhorns. We were talking about the Longhorns. So Mr. Logical is all out on the Arch train. Guess what? I am too.
Okay. Then I must be on the right track then.
I'm out on Arch. Like so not out as far as like he's a bum or anything along those lines, but I just don't know if he's going to be good enough to get Texas where people think that he could get them to. And then when you pair that with the things that we were saying about Sark, it's just not a good combination. Somebody has to be the steady hand, like as far as like, the quarterback coach combination. So we were talking about
very similar to what's
James
going
Franklin.
On in Alabama. Yeah.
Well, yeah. And we were talking about James Franklin. And, nobody, I don't think a lot of people believed in Drew Aller. And you already had James Franklin's track record against top 10 teams. So you kind of knew a national title or something like that wasn't, even though they did get to the semifinals and was a possession away from playing for the national title, you just
that
never
UCLA
believed.
Game. Yeah, that UCLA game confirmed your bias that I knew this wasn't going to be a match made in heaven. Yeah.
And then you got, I'm trying to think, there was another coach quarterback combination I had in my mind. But the point, so Ryan Day, like I felt that, like, even though Ryan Day had a bad rap, I thought that Ryan Day could win a title because you can't mess up Ohio State. Like, you're always going to have a chance. You can't mess it up. I think it was Jim Harbaugh that said he was born on third base and think he hit a triple. So, like, Ryan Day, I think, is a good enough coach that I thought that he could win a national title. With Sark, it's not that I think he's a bad coach. It's just that he seems to panic in those moments and just starts, like, everything that got you there, he gets away from. And I agree with you. Texas should be at least 10-2. And they should be, though, realistically speaking, and I know I've been talking all this trash about Texas. Texas should be 12-0 this year. Like, just looking at everything that they have, Texas should be 12-0. They were the preseason number 1 last year. They finished last year on a high note. They beat A&M at their place. Then they turned around and just destroyed Michigan in the bowl game. So Sark has sounded real entitled this year. he's been the one. I don't mind Kirby Smart saying all the things about the SEC being tough and we should leave and all this kind of stuff. But when Sark is talking, it's like, put your belt on, son. Put your belt on.
Once what I mean? He's a Big 12 coach, coaching a Big 12 team that just
but they got my guys. Patch. But they got my guys, bro.
They have guys.
They got my guys, though. They went out and got Cam Coleman, who might be the best receiver in college football that's not named Jeremiah Smith. You know what I mean? And on his best day, he might be as good as Jeremiah Smith. They brought in Ryan Wingo as well. They went and got my guy. Remember this name from last year? They went and got my guy, Hollywood Smothers. You know what I'm saying? From NC State, my guy, my favorite running back. You know, they went and got Raleek Brown from Arizona State to shore up the backfield. On defense, they went and got Rasheem Biles, you know, who was supposed to be the man at Pitt this year, but Texas went and paid. They got Colin Simmons, you know, who led the SEC in sacks last year, you know, at Texas with 12 sacks. You know, they got Jelani McDonald. They got Grayson Littleton, you know, Lance Jackson, Tyanthony Smith, Cade Phillips, Bo Masco, the one of the two good players Rutgers had on defense last year. You know, like I wasn't going to disrespect my guy, Koch Sanders like that. But Texas got everything you could possibly want. They went and got Will Muschamp back. So, like, look, if Texas doesn't win the national title this year, Sark got to go.
It wasn't meant to be.
I don't care if you're 11-1, you know what I'm saying, and you get the bye. If you come off that bye and lose the playoff game like these teams been doing, you might gotta go. You know what I'm saying?
For me, I'm not.
They got the players, man. They got the players.
I'm not gonna jump out the bender like that. But for me, I just first personally believe that, like you said, he has the weapons, but there's not a lot of evidence to show that he can, you know, use them properly and get over the hump. That's the kind of, like, they're going to be one of those teams that get a wake-up call early. You know, either a loss to Ohio State,
week 2, there you go, right there, right?
Or, you know, they lose Ohio State, and then they get your guys, let's go 2-0. And then they get maybe a nail biter with Tennessee.
Nah, I think they killed Tennessee.
That was their wake-up call. But that's the thing. You believe that because they have the players to do so.
Well, that and the fact that Tennessee is going to be starting a freshman quarterback who isn't a highly, you know, he's not like Julian Sand or something, or DJ Lagway type of quarterback.
Yeah, so then you have your rivalry, obviously, at the Red River Shootout.
I got them losing. Yep, I got them losing the Red River. I got them losing to Ohio State.
You're big on Florida. I'm still pretty.
Whoa! Watch your mouth.
You're big on Florida being. Listen, you're big on Florida being a sport.
They'll be improved. They'll be improved. But I also think that Texas.
They're going to be a loss. Yeah, they're going to be a blemish on one of the top. So we got Georgia playing Florida, correct?
Yeah. Georgia, Oklahoma,
Ole Miss, and Texas. So one of those 4 teams is probably going to win the SEC.
I don't think it's going to be Texas, though. Like, because I think Texas is going to circle that game based off what I was just talking about a few minutes ago. Like, that was the game that kept them out the playoff last year. So, like, they're not, and they're coming to Austin this time. I don't think Sark's going to let that slide.
Yeah, notably that's probably a great prediction. But you have Florida as you seem to kind of pinpoint in Florida as the SEC championship linchpin for one of these 4 teams. Like, somebody's not going to make the playoff or not going to make the conference championship.
And it's because you lost to Florida.
Because you lost to Florida. You know, on top of the schedule you already have. So it's going to be tough. Like I said, with their history, that Missouri game could be tough. It's just because we don't believe inherently and intrinsically in Sark. 9-3 is not crazy.
No, it's not. But I think a 9-3 Texas also.
But you're saying 11-1, he's fired. So
You know,
9-3.
But I think
nuts.
And I was just about to see, you took my line right there. I had that written down in my notes. But yeah, like I think that so I think depending on how it goes, I think a 9-3 Texas team is still alive for the playoff, though. That's the difference, I think, in our thinking. You know what I mean?
That's tough.
No, it really is. But think about it like this. You
got to factor in the SMU, Miami, and a Notre Dame could all be.
Well, yeah, it's going to be dependent on what happens elsewhere.
You got 11-1 Notre Dame, a 10-2, 11-1 Miami, and SMU wins the ACC championship. So you got a 11-2 Miami, but you don't hold a championship. I think that some of the
a 9-3 Indiana, a 9-3, or a 10-2 Oregon, depending on who they like. There's math around this, and we're talking about all these other teams. Like, you know what I mean? If they beat the Red River, that takes care of Oklahoma. If they beat Ohio State, or Ohio State's got Oregon and Indiana this year. Ohio State could be 9-3.
So there are two losses in a 10-2 scenario.
Good job, Riz.
You got LSU.
If that's going to be the
State.
one. That's going to be the one. That game at LSU.
So you're 10-2. You lose to LSU and Ohio State. I can see you up there, but if you are pitted against 11-1 Notre Dame.
Well, it just depends. You know what I'm saying?
If that's the coin, if that's the linchpin,
if Miami comes up to South Bend and put a 3-touchdown win on the board.
Oh yeah, 40 even 45-10 against Notre Dame. Yeah, a little bad. But if they finish that season out strong and finish 11-1, hell, Miami beat them head to head. And they finished the season essentially at the same pace, and they had them.
Don't forget they played BYU. So you bring up an interesting point here. The G5 team. It's tough for me. This is a tough subject for me because I'm a fan of, if they can't win the national title, or like if we feel that their schedules aren't tough enough for them to get in, why they here? Like, you know what I mean? If they're going to be here, we got to treat them like they're here. You know what I mean? Like, right. but if they're not going to, if you're going to, we can think, but that's where the 24 comes in, I guess, because, I don't know. But the G5, we'll get to that here in a little bit with our playoff predictions. But, I think that a G5 playoff might be closer to happening than, we would have originally thought. But yeah, so I think that Texas is, them in Ohio State, the loser of that game, either one could end up 9-3. Because remember, I didn't have Ohio State in my Big Ten championship game. So, we'll see. We'll see. But Texas's rival, their, neighbor college station, A&M, Aggies, said my baby school. Marcel Reed is back, 3,000 yards. He's one of the only 3 SEC quarterbacks last year. Him, Trinidad Chambliss, and Diego Pavia, 3,000 yards and ran for at least 550. The issue, though, he throws picks. He threw 12 of them. They, in those 2 losses that they had last year, 0 touchdowns, 4 interceptions. So what's the key? Hold on to the damn ball. But KC Concepcion is gone. They still have Mario Craver. They got Ruben Owens back. So that's good news for A&M. They lost a little bit on defense. Cassius Howell is in the NFL now. Rylan Kennedy is a Seminole. So expect a little bit, trying to build that pass rush back. But I think the secondary will hold it down. But here it is, Mr. Logical. A&M has not won 10 games in back-to-back seasons since 1992 and 93. So Mike Elko has a chance here to do something that not many A&M coaches do.
40 years, yeah.
Yeah, and, they are coming off making the playoffs last year. And, of course, they lost that game in the last minute of the game. So starting off with Missouri State, I call that a win. I call Arizona State a win at home. They get Kentucky. That should be a win. Should be a win. Then you get at LSU, right? That's where it all happened last year. That was the Saturday night game that got Brian Kelly out of there. Thank you. Then they get Arkansas, who they just don't lose to for some reason. They go to Missouri. They get the Citadel, El Cid in the house. They go to Tuscaloosa. They go to South Carolina after the bye. They play Tennessee. They go to OU. They close with Texas. This is I think this is 8-4 with a very dangerous path to 7-5.
I mean, it's like I say, you just quoted the stat about them not winning back-to-back seasons with 10 wins. So that's tough. You want to believe, but it's hard in the SEC to have essentially, for lack of a better word, like a flash year, and it becomes sustainable, especially now in the era of like teams moving around. And we knew Texas A&M was throwing money around when Jimbo Fisher was there. I think they're still paying him. Remember the famous booster meeting with Nick Saban asking for more money because Texas A&M bought other players. So it's very tough. Your 8-4 teetering, scary 7-5 is realistic.
Yeah, I mean they go to LSU, Bama, and OU. You know what I'm saying? Like they got to go to Tuscaloosa, they got to go to Death Valley, and that's probably going to be a night game. You know what I'm saying? And they got to go to Gaylord Memorial, and that's before they play Texas. So
and they also got whatever South Carolina brings you, they got to go there. So yeah, it's a tough.
Yeah. So now this is where we get into the variance teams, right? Your Florida, your Auburn, your LSU, your South Carolina. This is where you get into that part of it because I mentioned Alex Golesh, the new head coach at Auburn. He was the architect of that Josh Heupel offense at Tennessee that hasn't looked the same since he's been gone. He's been at South Florida. By the way, he did win at the Swamp last year as the head coach of South Florida. So he's not opposed to this SEC thing. He's bringing Byron Brown with him, the quarterback, along with Jeremiah Cobb, they're in Nakai Davenport, 3 of their receivers from UCF. So he's bringing his squad with him. They kept DJ Durkin as the defensive coordinator. Here's one for you. Auburn hasn't finished top 50. That's 5-0 in scoring offense since 2019. On defense, they got Xavier Atkins, first team all SEC back. This is it. This is one of the teams, in addition to Florida, that their quarterback is dynamic enough, Brown, that you could get got if you take Auburn lightly. And we talked about Georgia, so I don't know I don't think they beat Georgia, obviously, but Mr. Logical, I regret to inform you, Auburn is going to start the season in Atlanta, said against the Baylor Bears. They came down here and beat Baylor at Waco last year. Southern Miss. So I think they're 2-0. Then 2-5 moment. Remember, I was excited about the border war. Auburn and Florida was one of the best SEC rivalries when I was a kid / before I was born. Some of the better games that you've seen in SEC history. They get Vanderbilt. They go to Tennessee. Off the bye at Georgia, LSU back-to-back because LSU and Auburn should play every year. Then they get Ole Miss. It goes downhill real fast. You know what I mean? Real fast. So can you be the team that avoids a loss to Auburn?
Someone's got to lose just because that's just the nature of football in SEC. So if I'm looking at it, Where does Auburn get their steal? So we're looking at Georgia, Ole Miss, Bama.
I would like to say LSU just because it's at home. Um, out of those games, because they go to Ole Miss, they go to Georgia.
So you have LSU in this middle of the pack potentially. You have an 8-4 LSU.
Yeah, because I got so many questions about LSU. You know what I mean? Like Lane Kiffin is another Sark when it comes to the big games, and how it just suddenly disappears. Like I don't know if Ole Miss makes the playoff run they made last year if Kiffin was still there. Also, additionally, LSU still has secondary issues that I feel they haven't solved. They still got to figure out wide receiver, which is something that you never really think that you say about LSU. They haven't been able to run the ball. Their quarterback is coming off of, foot surgeries and all this kind of stuff. So LSU's not, like people are caught up in Lane Kiffin, and obviously he brought some talent from Ole Miss with him. You know what I mean? But I think you need a year. I think they need a year to kind of figure out the formula.
Yeah, because he has some pretty pedestrian years at Ole Miss with NFL talent. Like a lot of guys getting drafted off those rosters and pretty much trying to beg their way into the playoff a couple years ago when Jackson Dart was starting.
And they lost 3 games that year.
Yeah, they lost 3 games that year. I mean, looking at Auburn.
I mean, if I was Auburn,
a 7-5 Auburn doesn't surprise me.
Yeah, I'm thinking 6-6, but yeah, I think if you could get 7-5, you're happy as an Auburn fan. Coming off of the last couple of years, and as far as LSU goes, LSU, like I said, they got talent. Obviously, they're LSU. They got Jordan Seaton from Colorado, offensive lineman, probably the best offensive lineman in the country. They went and got Eugene Wilson from Florida, who's great once he has the ball in his hand. You just got to get the ball in his hand. And to do that, he's got to be on the field, which he doesn't tend to be a lot. Jace Brown from Kansas State, there's your deep threat, like him a lot. Winston Watkins over from Ole Miss. He was a freshman last year, so a lot of people are excited for him. They went and got, from Ole Miss, Prince. I forgot how to say his last name, but he was third in the SEC in sacks with 9 sacks. They got Ty Benefield from Boise at safety. But like I said, what about those corners that were getting picked on last year? You got Whit Weeks coming back, from his broken ankle, which is ironic, of course, because he's dating Lane Kiffin's daughter. So, they lost Mansour Delane. So LSU is a team that's going to have a lot of hype because of all the drama. But I think peeling it back and looking at it, you find more questions than answers. And so I think they do get off to a good start. I think they beat Clemson in week 1. I think they beat Louisiana Tech. Then they go to Oxford. So that's going to be the buzzsaw. They get A&M the week after that. They'll beat McNeese. They'll win at Kentucky, which if you look at the history, and I know these guys haven't been there, LSU doesn't typically play well at Kentucky. Mississippi State, at Auburn, bye week, Bama, Texas. Both of them at home, though. Both of them at home. At Tennessee, at Arkansas to close the year. So, yeah, I think 8-4 is on the table, but it just might be one of those years where you beat the teams that you're supposed to beat.
And then you steal 2 of the games that you should theoretically lose because it's your first year as a head coach in a very tumultuous offseason.
Yeah.
This could be like a 10-2, 11-1 year for LSU.
It could be
off of talent.
It's off of
talent and arrogance.
This could be a playoff team, to be honest with you, but but the games aren't played on paper. That's the only problem.
Now, if it's close, if it's a fringe, if it's 10-2, personality-wise, I think they put LSU brand and personality-wise. I think Lane Kiffin and the LSU Tigers.
Oh yeah. Especially if Ole Miss gets in, you probably want to set up a playoff matchup. Yeah. Said if you can,
that'd be an 8-9 game. No matter how it looks, they'll make that 8-9 game.
And say they didn't do it on purpose. Then you got that's a good point. That's a good point. Thanks for bringing that up. I forgot they brought Coach Orgeron back. Yeah, you know what I mean? So maybe not for this year, but like next year, like recruiting-wise, they're going to be killing it for real. Then you got the Gators that we were talking about. The team, don't lose to Florida. John Summerall in from Tulane. Buster Faulkner in as the OC from Georgia Tech. He brought Aaron Philo with him, but it may not be Aaron Philo as the starter. We'll have to watch that play out. It sounds like it's going to go all the way through fall camp. Over the past 5 years, Florida is 29-34. But you will see a little difference here because, Billy Napier was stuck in the 80s with that 3 yards in a cloud of dust. That's not Florida football. Florida football is speed and open space. Catch me if you can. So I think they're going to get back to that. They kept Jaden Baugh at running back. They got Eric Singleton at wide receiver, who I like a lot. Vernell Brown as well. Dallas Wilson is back. So Florida's going to be able to get up and down the field on teams. I think that
which should be the standard already.
Yeah, and that's where the Auburn game, like I mentioned, becomes very important, because Florida can't lose that game. On defense, Miles Graham, Jaden Robinson, and Bryce Thornton. Jaden Woods, pass rush. So and they got Mr. Logical's favorite DB, Cormani McClain.
I don't know what Dion said to him that run him out of Colorado, but Florida's got a gym. Like I said, I remember watching a high school all-star game before I joined the Air Force, so way back in the late 90s, back in the 1900s. It was Florida versus the other 49 states. Like the best high school players from the state of Florida versus the other 49 states. So for a coach at Florida not to understand that it's just there's speed offensively and speed and power defensively, send it out on the field. Watch what happens. So, yeah, he probably deserved to lose his job. You should never be an underachiever at Florida with the talent pool that you have to choose from.
Yeah. They opened the season with Florida Atlantic. Then they get the Fighting Camels of Campbell. They get the game at Auburn we've been talking about. They get Ole Miss there. Don't forget they beat Ole Miss 2 years ago with Jackson Dart there. They go to Mizzou, South Carolina at home, at Texas, bye week, Georgia, OU. So that's a tight – thank God for that bye week. That would be a horrible back-to-back-to-back.
And neutral site with Georgia, obviously.
Yep. Go to UK.
Why can't they just play in Athens? Who knows?
Saying Florida State. So, I mean, the Gators, like I said, they're variants. They can go anywhere, I think, from 6-6 to 9-3. You know what I mean? They could. And a lot of that is me just loving John Summerall, too, and, hating that he's their head coach. But yeah, just don't lose to the Gators, y'all.
And like you said, I think you might be on to something. That's going to be something I look out for this year. It's like what team, like, does Ole Miss lose week 4?
They could.
That changes the whole trajectory of the SEC.
It changes the whole algebra, as they say. Then you got South Carolina. They went from 4-8 to 9-4. Mr. Logical had them in his national title game last year.
Yeah. Didn't work out.
Lots of heartbreak for South Carolina last year. Remember, they were up, 31-3 at Texas A&M before the thing happened in the tunnel.
Then they got bullied by the police. And then
they got bullied. Yeah, they got bullied by the police. 2 years in a row, they had Bama on the ropes and just couldn't pull it out. This year, they got to go back to Tuscaloosa. New offensive coordinator, Kendall Browse is in from TCU. Sounds good. Problem is, 4th offensive coordinator in the last 5 years. And, you have a quarterback like Lenore Sellers who has a very specific skill set. South Carolina slander. No, man. I love the Palmetto. But Lenore Sellers, a lot of people are thinking he could be the top quarterback in the NFL draft or, one of the first 2 or 3 taken. So it's going to be interesting to see him under another offensive coordinator and see if that messes anything up as far as rhythm. He brings Nick Harbor back. For those of you that were playing NCAA 26, you know exactly who Nick Harbor is. And yes, in real life, he's that damn good too. They got offensive line issues, And of course, they went and got an offensive lineman from NC State that was probably going to be their best offensive lineman. Hurt himself playing basketball. You know what I'm saying? So there's that. They got a lot of defensive production back, but what I'm concerned about is my guy, Dylan Stewart. You know, he had an inconsistent year last year, but I'm expecting big things this year, provided that his back heals up, because he's been dealing with back issues during the offseason. That's never a good sign, because they could just creep up at any moment. Yeah. They did bring back all three linebackers. Remember this name, defensive back, Bakari Swain. Not just because it's a cool ass name, but he's a great player. You know, he has 3 punt returns for touchdowns. Last season, he only allowed a 9.2 QBR against opposing quarterbacks. So South Carolina is one of these teams that I've been talking about. Don't lose to South Carolina, because if it's one thing that Mr. Logical knows, there's going to be some Beamer ball.
Oh, yeah. You can lose a game 17-13.
You could.
And the offense doesn't score a touchdown.
Yeah. And I think they got a 3-0 start heading into Tuscaloosa. You know, so but to your point, like you brought up Bama earlier, you said they could be 5-0, but none of those games prepared them for Georgia. So correct. I think South Carolina could be in that same boat where you're 3-0, but are you ready to go to Tuscaloosa?
But in the same sense, Bama's 3-0. Are they ready for South Carolina to come to Tuscaloosa?
Maybe.
It's so many questions. And like I said, we talk about the SEC. You ran down the litany of talent that's transferred into Texas. We talk about the returning talent in South Carolina. We talk about the talent pool that these coaches can pull from. Ultimately, it's going to be 1 or 2 teams that really set themselves apart, and then about 2 teams that are going to be hovering around 2 to 3 losses, more likely 3. And then, so it's probably be 3 teams with 3 losses and 2 teams that are competing for the conference championship. You just don't want to lose, for lack of a better word, the gimme game. You don't want to lose if you're Ole Miss, Texas, Bama, Oklahoma, Georgia. So those are your 5 that you're probably vying for the top 2 spots. Don't drop that game to Florida. Don't drop that unsuspecting game to South Carolina. Don't get in a random dog fight with Mississippi State.
Which could happen.
They seem to be able to generate those games. The last couple of drives, a shank punt, missed field goal, a missed assignment defensively, and the first down is converted, and they lose the game. So those are like your top 5 SEC schools. They just have to avoid the mistake that 3 of them will make.
Yeah, the problem for South Carolina,
2 will get through pretty clean. 2 of them will get through at your 11-1, 12-2, or 12-0. Maybe a really, really good 10-2. We talk about Texas potentially losing to LSU and Ohio State, but kind of really handling business everywhere else. Don't be that team that your 3rd loss is to Arkansas because you weren't paying attention.
The problem is that South Carolina has to have a bye week. That's the problem. Because after you wake up after the bye week, Tennessee at Oklahoma, A&M at Arkansas, Georgia and Clemson on the road. Georgia, and then the Clemson game is at Clemson back to back. That is a hell of a finish for a coach trying to save his job. I mean, you'll definitely save it. You know what I'm saying? You know what I'm saying? If you get some wins up in there, you know what I mean? Like if you could get A&M in one of Georgia or Clemson, you know, especially if it's Georgia, you know what I'm saying? You saved your job, but you got to get through. You got to get through.
I think the saving grace is that game's at home.
Yeah.
That's a tough. My job is riding on this victory game.
Yeah.
I think that's tough for anybody, any part of the season. But week 12,
you remember the
Georgia,
other day. Well, you remember the other day we were talking about teams that are 10-2 teams with 8-4 schedules. You know, I legit think South Carolina's a 9-3 team with a 6-6 schedule. You know what I mean? And I wouldn't be surprised if they're 5-7. Because that's just tough. Like, you know what I mean? Like, because like you could be like after that Oklahoma game. Now, granted, they usually match up with A&M pretty well, but A&M's still a tough team. You go to Arkansas, which could be sleepy. You know what I mean? Like you're looking forward to Georgia. You know what I'm saying? Like I don't know, man. That's a tough way to end the year.
Your admiration for this guy Summerall, down in Florida, they can be 4-2 going into the bye with a loss to Bama and a loss to Florida.
They could be.
And then now you have Tennessee, Oklahoma, Texas A&M, Arkansas, Georgia, and Clemson on the back end.
Yeah, that's Tennessee.
Your 5-7 sounds sadly realistic, but I just can't see them losing that many games in that stretch. But the schedule doesn't really allow them to breathe at all.
I think the Tennessee game is going to be the difference between a bowl game or not. And then, let's talk about Tennessee here. They went out and got Jim Knowles to shore up their defense. People might remember him as the only good defensive coordinator Oklahoma State ever had. Say he was also the Ohio State defensive coordinator a few years ago. And then, of course, he left there to get egg on his face at Penn State. So people think of offense when it comes to Tennessee. I brought up Josh Heupel, Alex Golesh, so on and so forth. But it's been the defense that we thought about lately. James Pierce, for example, Colton Hood and guys like that they've had on their defensive rosters. This year, the defense ain't going to be that. The problem is now your quarterback room. You know what I mean? Because, you got George McIntyre, who's the true freshman who might get the start. Your backup is Ryan Staub, if you remember him from Colorado.
Yeah.
Your third string is a freshman who might be the future of Faison Brandon, which at this point, I'm like, just play the future at this point. Get him some experience. But anyway, they are loaded at linebacker, but the rest of the defense I have questions about, which ain't a good thing because that means I'm questioning your pass rush, and that means I'm questioning your secondary. Even though, they do have good players, it's about experience, though. Joey Aguilar he came in, the whole trade for Nico, that wasn't really a trade. He turned the ball over in big moments. Luckily, they don't play Georgia this year because they still haven't beat Georgia since 2016 when Josh Dobbs threw the Hail Mary to Jawan Jennings.
What a great game.
And last year was the time to do it, right? Like Chris Brazell, you remember him over the top in the first quarter. Tennessee put up 21 in that first quarter, if I remember correctly, and they went to overtime, lost to Georgia. So, but they don't play Georgia this year. They don't play Florida. Absolute foul on the SEC. They do bring back Deshaun Bishop. He went over 1,000 last year in the backfield. So looking at Tennessee, this is crazy, because they get Georgia Tech week 2 on the road. They're going to Atlanta, so we'll see. But then we get a UT versus UT. Tennessee hosting Texas, Neyland Stadium. And then they get Auburn the week after. They go to Arkansas before they get the third Saturday in October. Coming off of Bama, you go to the Palmetto like we just talked about. Bye week, Kentucky. And I will tell you, Kentucky fans in football live to beat Tennessee the way that Tennessee basketball lives to beat Kentucky basketball. So watch out there. They go to A&M, they get LSU, and then they close at Vanderbilt. So I'm going to do it like this. Texas, loss. Bama, loss. A&M, loss. LSU, loss. Can you not lose to Georgia Tech? Can you not lose at South Carolina?
Yeah, but you're like, well, that's 7-5, right? 7-5.
That's
9.
Yeah, that's at least 8-4. So like, yeah, and then you figure they're not good enough. So like, yeah, they're going to lose somewhere else too.
Yeah, they're gonna like
They could lose at Vandy.
Yeah, that's the double-edged sword that is the SEC. That someone's gonna have to be mediocre. There has to be some sub 500 teams that we might have thought were going to be better, especially with the sheer number of teams that are in. Vandy might be one of those teams that rolls out a nice 4-8 year for you, like how South Carolina was last year. Missouri tends to be a really good team year after year. They're pretty solid, but you lose a player or two and you really can't compete with the rest of the SEC because of the way that the rest of these teams are financially positioned to reload every offseason. So someone's going to have to play poor. Like someone's going to have a poor schedule and lose some coaches and some players strictly because of the environment that they play football in.
Yeah. So you brought up Missouri. They've been a team that's been awesome over the last couple of years. In the last 3 years, Mr. Logical, the only teams that have more SEC wins than Missouri are Georgia, Texas, Bama, and Ole Miss. That's it. I didn't say LSU. I didn't say A&M. You know what I'm saying? I didn't say Tennessee. These are the teams that Missouri has outperformed over the last couple of years. And they got my guy, Ahmad Hardy. I was high on him last preseason. He came in with 1,600 yards. Unfortunately, he got shot a couple of months ago. So we'll see what happens there, but they do have a capable backup, Jamal Roberts. Austin Simmons. Remember him? He came in against Georgia 2 years ago at Ole Miss, led a touchdown drive as a freshman, and people said, that's the future of Ole Miss. Until he wasn't. He got benched last year.
Didn't he graduate high school like 16 or something like that?
Something like
real
that.
Fast burner. Yeah.
And they bring in Chip Lindsey as the OC. He came from Michigan. They only allowed 19 points a game last year. They had 11 defenders who have at least started 7 games from last year. They gone. So this ain't that Missouri team anymore. They lost Josiah Trotter, Jeremiah's son. They got Chris Graves from Ole Miss, Jaleel Florence from Oregon at corner, but they lost 7 of their top 8 corners. So this is where teams might have to start loading up on some wins if you could beat Missouri, because this is not going to be the same Missouri team of old. Yeah. So looking at their schedule, they start off with Pine Bluff, picking on the HBCUs early, then, the border war.
Your favorite rivalry.
That's right. Well, one of them at least. And then early, I know it's early. Today is July 28th. Upset alert. Week 3, that game against Troy. Be careful. Then they go to Starkville, a.k.a. Stark Vegas. They play Florida at home. They get A&M back-to-back, but then they go to Ole Miss before the bye. Go to Arkansas, host Texas, at Georgia, UK, Oklahoma. So I don't know who did that schedule. And who, they must have knew Missouri was going to be down this year.
Kick them.
Let's take their lumps now and get back to it next year. But I don't know what to do with the schedule, man. I think they could start 2-0, maybe even 3-0. I do think Troy is an upset alert for real. I wasn't making that up. But 3-0, and then it gets real crazy trying to find the wins after that. Because I think Mississippi State will be better, and it's down in Stark Vegas. Maybe you get Arkansas, because I got them finishing last in the SEC. But I don't know.
That's your 4-8 team. Like, they have scheduled losses, and especially with the talent deficit. You say you lost how many? 11
players that started at least 7 games. Yeah,
that means you have to.
You're basically replacing your whole defense, and
you replace your whole defense, and it's a benefit to it where least you have a clean slate, blank canvas, whatever cliche you want to attach to it. Maybe they'll adapt to it. But seeing it in real speed after not being a starter last year is going to be tough, considering, like I said, their schedule doesn't really line up with any favorable. They don't have a Texas Tech like schedule.
Right. So
they
let's
have
talk
a schedule
about
for a team that they're trying to make 4-8 to balance it all out.
So let's talk about the doors. Last year, Diego Pavia, almost got Vanderbilt to the playoff. A bad first half against Texas probably kept them out of the playoff last year because they would have been 10-2 with that win. Now what happens? Vanderbilt gets a 5-star quarterback? Jarrett Curtis turned down Georgia to come to Vanderbilt. Where they do that at?
He wanted to stay home.
I guess so. But Diego Pavia's gone. 3 of the 4 top receivers are gone. 4 starting old linemen are gone.
He's probably rethinking staying at home.
Yeah, 8 of their 11, players that were in the defensive front 6 that played a lot are gone. They do bring back Junior Sherrill, so he'll have him to throw the ball to. They went and got Cole Adams from Bama. Cedric Alexander's back in the backfield along with Mikaela Young. So you're good there, but that offensive line, you're replacing the whole thing. They've never had a good pass defense. They're not going to have a good pass defense this year. Vanderbilt, they start off with Austin Peay State. Win.
Yep.
Upset alert. Week 2.
Delaware Blue Hens.
The Blue Hens. You know what I mean? Like, shout out to Joe Biden. You know what I'm saying? Like the hens are coming. They get NC State week 3 before they go to Jordan-Hare. And then after Jordan-Hare, they go to Athens. After Athens, they play Ole Miss. It's at home at least. Then they get Arkansas, Kentucky, maybe some breathers there. Bye week at Stark Vegas before you go Bama at the Swamp, Tennessee. So I'm going to just ask you a simple question.
At least you avoid Texas.
I'm going to ask you a simple question because some people were arguing about this on Twitter earlier.
All right.
You see 5 wins on the schedule?
No. You teams that generally retool and that just reload and just run it right back the following year, they struggle to get the 7-8 wins. Like there were some years where Bama, when Bama got that 9-3, it didn't look like 9-3 was going to be a possibility. When you lose the talent, you lose either graduation, transfer portal, coaches moving, whatever the case may be, coaches retiring. So looking at this schedule, 5 wins, unless you are going to call Arkansas, Kentucky, and Mississippi State the SEC gimme games. Unless you just call it those 3 teams tend to be near the bottom of the SEC every year. So that's your opportunity to get 3 wins. Week 1, obviously. And I'll give them week 2. So I think that's your 5. But I believe they're kind of outmatched from a talent and experience position at every other game. Other than Florida, but Florida's just littered with talent to the point where just getting the ball in the guy's hand in space in Florida could generate 14 points.
Yeah. Now you got Mississippi State, 1 win in the SEC in the last 2 years. I talked about their heartbreaks already. They did win 5 games last year. I am ready for Kamario Taylor. That's going to be one of the best quarterbacks in the SEC. He won Freshman of the Week twice, and he didn't even start the season, by the way. You know who his backup is, Mr. Logical?
Probably somebody that was at Colorado at some point.
Nah, but here's a name for you. Jaden Rashada.
Is that the guy that sued everybody?
Yes. on his fourth school now. They got Floff Bothwell in the backfield coming back. The defense, they went and got Zach Arnett. Who is Zach Arnett? Zach Arnett is the guy that you don't want to be, but that's the guy that you want on your sideline. So Zach Arnett is the guy that replaced Mike Leach when, one, you can't even replace Mike Leach, but then given what that situation was.
One of one.
Yeah, he followed that legend in that situation. Then he got fired, and now the new head coach that they hired after you brings you back in as defensive coordinator. So, so they're going to get after it, lots of aggression, the game between the game they have against Minnesota could be the difference between a bowl game and not. For the love of God, Brandon Walker, stay off that sideline. Stay off that sideline.
Kryptonite to victory.
But yeah, looking at the schedule here, Mr. Logical. ULM, Louisiana Monroe. So that's going to be a win. That Minnesota game that I talked about.
That should be a win because that coach took everybody to Penn State.
It is. No, that was Iowa State.
Iowa State, okay.
Yeah. So they're going to Minnesota. They go to South Carolina. So back-to-back weeks. The travel distance is a concern. We'll see. They get Mizzou. They get Bama, both at home. Coming off the bye, just look at those first three games. At LSU, home for Oklahoma, at Texas. Yeah.
So that's 2.
That's 0-3 right there.
That's 2-6, 3-5.
Yeah, maybe 3-5. Then you get Vandy, Auburn, Tennessee Tech, and then you close your season at Ole Miss. So, yeah.
That's a sub-500 season. They might get a bowl game if somebody doesn't go to one.
Yeah, their over-under is 4.5. I was tempted to take the over. I was tempted.
I don't think the under would be a bad bet.
You know what I'm saying? I like the value of the over. Kentucky, I talked about Will Stein in the beginning. They're going to win because of him. They went and got Kenny Minchie, from Notre Dame. They have an experienced O-line. Here's a name that I've been saying on Sports Reports Disorder for a few years, and it just hasn't worked out just yet because of injuries. Their new running back, C.J. Baxter, who you might remember from Texas, but I've had high hopes for him ever since I saw him in high school, and he just keeps getting hurt every single year. They brought in Nick Anderson from LSU at receiver. Jay Bateman takes over as defensive coordinator from Texas A&M. Their secondary, if you're here, Riz, cover your ears. Their secondary went out 49er style last year. If there was an injury that could be had, they signed up for it. They did bring in 13 defensive transfers. They get Bama and A&M back-to-back, in week 2 and 3. So you don't even get a chance to work in your new offense, really. Youngstown State, don't laugh, week 1, the Penguins. That's one of the better traditional FCS programs. I haven't followed them this year to see what they look like this year, but that is not a gimme game going off of historical factors. They do get South Alabama in week 4. They go to South Carolina. Then they go LSU at Oklahoma back-to-back. Vandy bye week, at Tennessee, Swamp at Missouri, Louisville. They're going to be hard-pressed to get 4 wins, I think. And it's not even going to be due to anything that Will Stein or anybody's doing wrong. They just don't got the schedule that demands anything less.
Yeah, you don't have the horses for
or
this
more.
race.
Yeah, that you can't. Yeah, and then bringing up the rear,
if they had Texas in their schedule, it would be the absolute toughest schedule.
Yeah, that makes sense. Then bringing up the rear, you got Piggy. Pause. Arkansas with their new head coach, Ryan Silverfield. He did beat Arkansas last year as the head coach at Memphis. So, they know who they got. Arkansas last year, Mr. Logical, the game that got Sam Pittman fired, they gave up 56 points to Notre Dame. So they lost to Memphis. You know, they won their first 2 games of the season last year, which was a FCS win and against Arkansas State. Then they lost out and gave up at least 30 to everybody they played but LSU. That tells you what kind of year it was for LSU. KJ Jackson was the backup last year, so he may have the inside track for the job, but AJ Hill is giving them competition. The problem with AJ Hill is the throwing motion. I agree, but this is the problem. Arkansas went the Kentucky route and put all their money into basketball. You know, they went and got Coach Cal, and, you know, Tyson's Chicken and Walmart is giving Cal all the money. You know what I mean?
Hey,
but
like that's good ROI. Like I'm
getting
getting more exposure. I'm getting guys drafted into the NBA draft. I have the spotlight multiple days out of the week because of the sport.
Jerry Jones.
Versus you're not getting that spotlight Arkansas football.
Yeah,
I can get it on a Wednesday night in college basketball.
You know, and Jerry Jones, you know, he could be doing something about this too. You know what I mean? But
Jerry Jones needs to worry about his own team.
You know, well, you know, on defense at least, you know what I mean? They got Quincy Rhodes, who had 17 and a half tackles for loss. Their secondary is super slow. Hopefully Christian Harrison can help with that. They got Kamori House from North Carolina at linebacker. I like that a lot. But the key to their offense may be Chris Marshall. You know, he's a super talented guy. Started at A&M, went to Ole Miss, went to Boise. Lots of off-the-field issues is the problem here. So if he could keep his nose clean, they might have a pretty decent offense.
Stay out of trouble.
Yes, you know what I mean? But they start off Northern Alabama. Then they go to Salt Lake City.
That elevation is going to kill them.
They play Georgia the week after that.
The fucking dogs are going to kill them.
So coming from the elevation, even though it's at home, playing physical Georgia the week after playing Utah, that's a tough ask of anybody, let alone.
Utah's a very tough physical team. We talk about their Polynesian, Tongan,
Fiji, Samoan, all of it.
All the Samoan players. It's a lot of Tuiosos and Tuifasos and all these other guys.
Tui Asasopo.
These 300-pound guys that run 4.75, and it's like, how was that possible? Well, go to the Wasatch, you'll see them.
Yeah, don't sleep on Tulsa. Tulsa did go into Oklahoma State and win last year, so they're not afraid. Trey Lamb is a damn good coach who will probably be a Power 4 coach next year. They go to A&M. You know, who they haven't beat, I think it was since 2014, I think it is. Tennessee at home, at Vandy, so maybe you could get one of those two. Bye week, remember they did beat Tennessee with Nico the year that, you know, they made the playoff. Then let's see here. You got Missouri at Auburn, South Carolina, at Texas, LSU. So if Arkansas could win 5 games, you know, like they would be on the right path. They ain't winning 5 games. You know what I'm saying? Like maybe they go 4-8. You get Northern Alabama, maybe you get Tulsa, you get Vandy, and maybe you get one of Missouri or Auburn. Let's see what South Carolina is at that point of the year and where their coach is. You know, maybe you could squeeze out 4. That's tough business, man. Tough business. You know what I'm saying? But then that's not it. We got playoff predictions to get to close things up. So we're going to call this one Call Your Shot. You know what I'm saying? So you want me to go first or would you like to go first?
I'm going to do my terrible one that never comes to fruition. And I don't really know always how the math is going to work. But you want me to go matchups?
However you want to do it.
All right, so my 12-5 game, Boise State, Texas. I think Texas has a couple of losses, but they still squeeze them in there somehow.
Okay.
Texas wins that. I got BYU, Oregon in my 11-6 matchup.
Okay.
Oregon pulls that one out. I got a sleeper.
Not South Carolina, though.
It's a different USC. I just felt like, you know what? The West Coast hasn't gotten a lot of love since the
Cold Crush.
Since the college playoff started. I just felt like they've been kind of thrown out to pasture. And it's like, yo, that's a talent pool that's just kind of like, untapped resource. So SMU USC, I got SMU winning that game. Ole Miss, Texas Tech. My 8-9 matchup, I got Ole Miss winning that game. 1, 2, 3, and 4. Ohio State, Miami, Indiana, Georgia.
Okay.
My national championship game is Ohio State versus Miami. Ohio State wins it all.
All right, Buckeyes.
It's kind of chalky. I don't know. I just figure that talent just kind of weighs out. And as we talked about every year, they're gonna get the benefit of the doubt. They're gonna get the favorable matchup. They're gonna get whatever ranking that puts them as close to home or in the best position to go forward. Because after the 12 games are played, then it becomes theater.
Mm-hmm.
And I think the committee operates as the producers and the directors and the stage hands of this theatrical performance, and puts teams in a position of where you're going to get the best shot. And I just think the returning talent that Ohio State brought back, quarterback, offense, the
quarterback that you don't like.
I don't like him, but I like him for them. I like what he does for them.
Okay.
I don't think he has the same. I'm not thinking they're number one if he doesn't have the horses around him. Like if he was like that, the kid that went to Vanderbilt, the 5-star guy.
Yeah.
If he was getting recruited at Ohio State and they were like, "Hey, Julian, we're moving off of you," and he had to go to Vanderbilt, I don't think he leaves him there. But I think his 3,300 yards or 3,500 yards and very few interceptions and very limited turnovers. Just get the ball to your playmakers, just the ultimate game manager at the college level. I think that works in this because I think they have the least amount of questions. Ryan Day might be a question, but I think Jeremiah Smith can wash away the Ryan Day questions on a deep post.
No, and I agree with you because for one, with the ACC, it's reputation based. So I think for the ACC to get 2 win, using Miami as the champion, Miami would have to be undefeated and beat a 1-loss team in the ACC title game or something along those lines. Like last year, remember they say they don't penalize teams that lose in their conference title game. Virginia didn't get in the playoff last year. You know what I mean?
But they also lost to a team that has 7 wins.
No, that's fine. That's fine. You know what I'm saying? I'm just saying. But I agree that it's going to be hard for both of them to get 2 win. So, all right. You ready for your 2-5 moments?
Let's hear it.
All right. Now, first of all, I'm going to preface this by saying, up in the studio getting blowed to the truest shit I ever smoked. You know what I'm saying? All right. So here we go. Taking it from the top. So I'm going to do it the same way you did it. So my 5-12 is BYU over UNLV. So I got UNLV as my G6 representative. I thought about Memphis. Agreed. Yep. I talked about that the other night. Memphis. I like Memphis. They don't play a Power 4 team, so so they got the Liberty schedule this year. Okay. I thought about, true 5 fashion. I thought about the United States Naval Academy, but then they just, without Heidenreich at running back, I just don't know how much I can trust them. Boise is probably the correct answer, but I just wanted to say something different because I had a feeling you were going to pick Boise. I would love to see North Dakota State myself. That would be fun. But UNLV gets North Dakota State and Cal at home back to back. So that's going to determine, how that plays out. And as a sleeper, I brought up Troy earlier, but as a sleeper, I might have my eye on the Raging Cajuns. You know what I mean? But I don't think they're going to have enough cachet, to crash the party. But
the sway to committee, yeah.
Yeah, but I like that. But I like that team a lot. So BYU over UNLV. In my 6-11, I got Indiana over Oklahoma. My 8-9, I got Texas over Bama. My 7-10, I got Ohio State over Texas Tech. So my 1 seed is the Oregon Ducks. My 2 seed is Georgia. My 3 seed is Notre Dame. And my 4 seed is Miami. And in true 2-5 fashion, give me the Oregon Ducks winning the national title over Notre Dame.
All right, we'll see what happens.
Yes. Yeah, I like Oregon. Everything they're bringing back. We talked about Dan Lanning. We seem to be in this era of the unbelievable, or like getting over the hump. Like we just saw the Knicks get over the hump. Ryan Day got over the hump. So the OKC won a title. We're in that era where Indiana. It's kind of like, like these things don't matter anymore. When you're looking at, Georgia, for example. So I got Georgia losing to Oregon. If they played today, I would probably pick Georgia. You know what I mean? But I got to factor in that SEC schedule and all that kind of stuff. Yeah. And you know what I mean? And the fact that the SEC, just going back to last year, right?
Oregon, Georgia is going to be in Atlanta, though.
That's fine. You know what I'm saying? I think Notre Dame, Georgia was in Atlanta.
Yeah.
But I think that, when you're looking at it with Indiana, they brought in a turnover machine at quarterback. You know what I mean? And so I think they're good enough to get through the Big Ten. I don't know if they're good enough to get all the way through, because I got Oregon over Indiana in my Big Ten championship
first
game.
Read. Off that RPO, throw the slant.
And they got the weapons. They absolutely have the weapons.
Throw the slant, and you're good to go.
So I was tempted to find a way for. So I was thinking, I was like, between Texas Tech and Texas, one of these teams could not make the playoff. But then I thought, but look at Texas Tech's schedule, though. There's no way you can leave them out. Like, you know what I mean? Yeah. Even if they lose a game, they could go win the Big 12. You know what I mean? So I have BYU over Houston in my Big 12 championship game. I have Houston beating Texas Tech, but I got Texas Tech winning out. So, you know what I mean? So that goes back to you don't hurt the team that lost in the conference championship game. The ACC.
They won't play in it, and they'll be 11-1.
Right. And then in the ACC, I got Louisville playing Miami for the ACC title, but I think Louisville's going to take some losses. So, you know what I mean? Like it's not like I was saying, 11-1 team that Miami's going to be matched up against, in my opinion. You know what I mean? Yes, Evan Stewart is back this year. He was hurt last year, but he's back this year. To go with DeCorian Moore, to go with De'Aaron Hill in the backfield, like it's a lot of talent out there in Eugene. I think that, like I said, I would have probably picked Navy if Heidenreich was still there, but without him, I think he was the heart of their offense. Texas, I'm fighting my bias because what up, Mike? Because Texas is, like I said, on paper, no doubt, but Texas is the best team in the country if you're just looking at paper. I just don't trust Sark enough to trust them, to not mess it up somehow. And when I look at Notre Dame, it goes back to schedule.
External pressure that the teams. I think Notre Dame external pressure is more supportive because they won't be in a dogfight all year long. The Miami game is probably the only exception. They're 11-1. They're on easy street. Texas, is in for a. They're not all heavyweight fights, but it's a lot of very tough sparring sessions in between these heavyweight matchups that they're going to have throughout the season. But I mean, you want to play with the big boys. You want to go from Big 12 to SEC. Like these are the kind of seasons you're going to have. So, but
yeah,
like I said, I just think the external pressure for Texas and Sark is not going to be the same thing that.
Dang, Mike, both of them. Both of them. I mean, Virginia Tech for sure. Virginia, I'm not so sure about. Like, I think Terrell Harris is a big loss, and Bo Pribula coming off that injury. I got to see a few games, before I can put that type of faith. But looking at this Notre Dame schedule real quick, so they opened with Wisconsin, which I believe is at Lambeau Field, if I remember correctly. They get Rice. They get a sneaky game against Michigan State. Now, I don't think Michigan State's very good, but, Pat Fitzgerald teams, are going to give you something to fight. So, you know what I mean? So, and that's one of my old school childhood rivalries that I'm happy that's back to. At Purdue, at UNC versus Stanford. So, win. Then you get into the BYU game at Lavelle Edwards. Now, that's going to be tough. You know what I mean? I think Notre Dame will win, but it's still going to be tough. Navy, then they get the big rematch with Miami that they've been waiting more than a year for. So I think they clip Miami. I think that's Miami's only loss of the season, before the playoffs. BC. Now, if the game was in Dallas, I would say watch out for SMU. But since it's in South Bend, I'm going to give Notre Dame that one. And then, you know what I mean? And then at Syracuse to close the year. So I think Notre Dame's
70.
Yeah, I think Notre Dame's 11-1. You know what I mean? I think that's just the way that it plays out.
I think championship game, no pressure, no one in their rearview mirror. It's literally who's on the board for this Saturday. That's all Notre Dame has to worry about.
Yeah,
everybody else that's vying, because we're looking at about 16 to 18 teams really vying for these 12 spots as we break it all down to brass tacks.
Right. And then, of course, you got to factor in the G6, so it might be less.
Yeah.
Because the G6 team is taking a slot, so it might be more like 15,
so like 15, anywhere from 15 to 17 teams that are vying for these spots, with Notre Dame essentially in their own lane.
No, I don't think it hurts them, Mike, because looking at their schedule, even though, it's not necessarily murderer's row, BYU is considered by the pundits to be the first or second best. Well, first to me, but, most pundits have them second in the Big 12. So you're talking about a second place Power 4 conference team. Miami just played in the national title game and is the runaway pick to win the ACC. And then SMU and a lot of media polls are being picked second in the ACC. So even though their schedule does lack that oomph, they're playing the right teams from some of these conferences. And even Wisconsin will be improved this year. So I think Notre Dame and Navy could win the American, if not finish second or third. So, I think that there's enough metrics, when you talk about strength of record and all those things that ESPN used to manipulate the rankings, Notre Dame will still have that.
And I said, after the 12 games are played and subsequently for some of these teams that are playing championships, it's theater. So what show is the best show for TV?
Yeah.
Notre Dame is the best show for TV against whomever in December.
I tell you what, the day one of these military teams make it to the playoffs, the media is going to go ham. And before we get out of here, I just got to say this because it's been on my heart for the last couple of days. We love Army and Navy. It's a game that's being played for the right reason. But the Air Force exists too, damn it. You know what I'm saying?
We won the Commander's Cup recently.
Where's all y'all support the troops people at when we're playing against, Navy are playing against Army. That game, y'all ain't trying to get that game national CBS and all that type of shit. You hypocrites. But we love y'all anyway. We will be back on Friday.
I got my medals. You know what I'm saying? Air Force did me good. I mean, off we go into the wild blue yonder.
Yeah, and don't forget, keep your eye. I think it's week 3, North Dakota State at Air Force. Keep your eye on that. But he is the world famous, world renowned, cool, calm, and collected. Born in Texas, raised in VA, representing everything New Jerusalem except for the Scarlet Knights. He is Mr. Logical, and he's just as upset as I am, but I'll get to that in a second here. Don't bring feelings to a fat fight.
Don't do it.
Downhill in the Alamo, going left so much you thought I was southpaw. I am upset because speaking of southpaws and ducking and all that stuff, how the hell ain't nobody know Earl Spence was fighting the other day? How the hell Anthony Joshua have a fight the other day? And it's not even being talked about. And he got knocked on his ass twice. You know what I mean? Thank you. Appreciate you. You know what I'm saying? Got knocked on his ass twice. And then knocked the same dude out with one punch in the next round. Earl Spence retired. And boxing ain't even talking about it. I don't even hear. Where's the advertising? But, this is Sports Reports is ordered. Like, review, subscribe, share, rate, do all the free things, do all the good things. Liquid Death in hand. We be back on Friday. We are everywhere that you get your podcasts. Check out Say Less, Say More. And just in the mood, we were going to do it anyway, but just put some extra oomph on that salute. Because off I go into the wild blue yonder out here. You know what I'm saying? We love y'all. Sports Reports is ordered. Out.
Hey. Sports reports, no gimmicks, no clowns. 2-5, Mr. Logical, we run this town. Real talk only, no chasing, no doubt. From the east to the west, it's the order we shout. Mic check, lights flash, game time, stay ready. 2 vets in the zone, keep the pressure real heavy. Big hits, big plays, yeah, we breaking it down. Truth rings in your speakers, every word is the crown. From the north side hustle to that southern flame. Midwest grind, west coast of the game. Sports talk kings, yeah, we wear that crown. Turn it up, let them know it's about to go down. Sports reports, no